Weddings are supposed to be filled with joy, blessings, and new beginnings. The day I had dreamt of all my life had finally arrived. The church was decorated with flowers, the guests were smiling, and the air was filled with happiness. My groom stood at the altar, waiting for me, his eyes sparkling with love and pride. It should have been the perfect moment. But just when I thought nothing could spoil it, my older sister walked forward, her heels clicking against the floor, her voice slicing through the laughter like a knife. She pointed at me, her face twisted with arrogance, and ordered me to hand over the keys to my farm. The entire hall fell silent. Whispers filled the air as my family and guests turned to look. My hands trembled as I clutched my bouquet. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. On the most important day of my life, my sister was demanding something that didn't belong to her, something I had worked for with blood, sweat, and tears. My farm wasn't just land. It was my future, my livelihood, my safe place. And yet, here she was, trying to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. Tears burned my eyes, but I stood frozen. This wasn't just about property. It was about years of hidden jealousy, rivalry, and betrayal finally exploding in the most humiliating way. Everyone was waiting for my response. Would I bow my head and obey her? Or would I finally take a stand and show her that I was no longer the little sister she could control? What I chose that day changed everything. My family, my marriage, and the rest of my life. The morning of my wedding dawned with a kind of nervous stillness that wrapped around me like a veil. Outside my window, the farm I had inherited from my late father stretched out in golden hues, the fields shimmering under the soft embrace of dawn. The air carried the smell of earth and wheat, the familiar scent of home. I had lived here all my life, tending to the soil, caring for the animals, watching each season come and go. Today, though, even the land seemed to sense that something was different. Today, I was about to leave behind the life of a daughter and sister, and step into the role of a wife. My friends had stayed overnight to help me prepare. Their laughter filled the house as they bustled about, arranging flowers, curling hair, and making last-minute adjustments to dresses. The excitement in the air was thick, yet underneath it, a strange unease rested in my chest, something I could not quite name. I had brushed it away at first, chalking it up to nerves, but the closer the ceremony crept, the stronger the feeling became. "Don't cry yet," teased my maid of honor Anna, when she saw my misty eyes as I stood before the mirror. "You'll ruin your makeup before the ceremony even begins." I forced a laugh, pressing my hands against my gown to smooth out invisible wrinkles. The satin dress, with its flowing train and delicate lace sleeves, was everything I had dreamed of. My fiancé, Michael, had insisted on paying for it despite my protests. He told me I deserved the world, and for the first time in years, I had let someone else take care of me. He was waiting at the church now, no doubt checking his watch, his heart probably racing as fast as mine. The thought brought a small smile to my lips. But when the door creaked open and my sister Clara walked in, the warmth inside me faltered. She looked stunning as she always did. Tall, elegant, wearing a sleek blue dress that shimmered under the light. Her hair was pinned back in a perfect chignon, not a strand out of place. She carried herself with the confidence of someone used to being admired, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor as if to remind everyone in the room that she had arrived. "Clara," I said softly, trying to push down the lump in my throat. She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, don't you look like a little princess?" Her tone dripped with that familiar mixture of amusement and condescension, the same tone she had used my whole life. "Thank you," I whispered, hoping she would say nothing more. I wanted peace today, just this once. But Clara never settled for silence. She walked slowly around the room, her gaze taking in the bouquets, the laughter, the satin ribbons tied around the chairs. Then her eyes returned to me, and she tilted her head. "It's funny, isn't it? That Dad left you the farm. You, the younger sister. You always had a way of getting things handed to you." Her words pricked like needles against my skin. I clenched my bouquet tighter. "It wasn't handed to me, Clara. You know how much time I spent working here with him." Her smile widened, sharp as glass. I had other responsibilities. I went to the city, built a life, made sacrifices. But Dad rewarded you for sticking around. How lucky for you. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. My friends exchanged nervous glances but said nothing. I wanted to defend myself, to remind her that she had left of her own choice, chasing freedom while I had stayed behind, caring for the farm and for our father as his health declined. But I also knew that no argument would ever change Clara's mind. She had carried resentment for years, and nothing I said would soften it. Before I could answer, she leaned in close, her perfume overwhelming, her lips near my ear. One day, little sister, you'll realize that farm was meant to be mine. And when that day comes, I'll be waiting. Her words chilled me, but before I could reply, she pulled back. Her expression transformed once again into a mask of politeness. She kissed my cheek lightly and said loudly, "Good luck today, darling," before gliding out of the room as though nothing had happened. I stood frozen, my hands trembling slightly. Anna came over, adjusting my veil gently, her eyes full of concern. "Don't let her ruin this for you," she whispered. "This is your day, not hers." I nodded, though a storm raged inside me. Clara's bitterness had followed me for years, but today it felt heavier, like a shadow looming over the joy I was supposed to feel. I tried to shake it off, reminding myself of Michael, of the vows we would soon exchange, of the life waiting for me beyond my sister's envy. But still, her words clung to me like thorns. The ride to the church was quiet. My mother sat beside me, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, whispering prayers under her breath. She had always tried to keep peace between Clara and me, but deep down I knew she understood the truth. Clara's jealousy wasn't new. It had been woven into the fabric of our lives for as long as I could remember. Still, I told myself that today would be different. Today, nothing would take away my happiness. The church was breathtaking. Flowers lined the aisle, candles flickered softly, and the sound of the organ filled the air. As I walked in, every head turned toward me, and for a moment, all I saw was Michael's face at the altar. His eyes widened, his lips parting slightly as though he couldn't believe I was real. That look alone was worth every tear, every worry, every sleepless night. Step by step, I moved closer to him, my heart soaring, the world blurring around us. The ceremony began, the priest's words echoing in the sacred hall. Guests watched with smiles, some wiping away tears. It was perfect until the silence broke. Just as Michael and I were about to exchange vows, Clara rose from her seat. Her heels struck the stone floor with a commanding echo, her voice slicing through the sacred stillness. "Before you say, 'I do,'" she declared loudly, "there's something my sister owes me." Gasps rippled through the church. My chest tightened, dread washing over me in waves. Clara stepped forward, her eyes blazing with a strange mixture of triumph and venom. "Hand over the keys to the farm," she ordered, her voice sharp, clear, merciless. "Right here. Right now." The world seemed to freeze around me. My bouquet nearly slipped from my hands. Guests exchanged shocked whispers. My mother buried her face in her hands, and Michael's grip on mine tightened like steel. My sister had chosen this moment, my wedding day, to make her move, to demand what she believed was hers, to humiliate me in front of everyone I loved. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I stared at her, my lips parting but no words escaping. The farm wasn't just property. It was my life, my future, the last piece of my father I still carried with me. And now, Clara was trying to snatch it from me before I even spoke my vows. The silence was suffocating, heavy with expectation. Every eye in the room was on me, waiting to see what I would do. My heart hammered in my chest, my throat dry, my vision blurring with tears. And in that moment, as my sister's command echoed in my ears, I realized the wedding wasn't just about love anymore. It was about a battle that had been brewing for years, a battle I could no longer avoid. The church had never felt so suffocating. What should have been the most beautiful moment of my life had turned into something out of a nightmare. Clara's words still rang through the air, bouncing off the walls, cutting into me deeper than any blade. "Hand over the keys to the farm." The audacity of her demand left me frozen, my throat tight, my hands trembling as if I were a child again standing beneath her shadow. I could hear the restless murmur of the guests. Some gasped, some whispered in disbelief, and others shifted uncomfortably in their seats as though they wanted to disappear. My mother's sobs echoed softly from the pews, muffled by her handkerchief. My maid of honor, Anna, looked ready to leap from her place and claw Clara's eyes out, but her gaze flicked to me, waiting, urging me silently to respond. And Michael, sweet Michael, held onto my hand with such strength, as though he could anchor me to the earth while a storm tried to tear me away. His eyes searched mine, pleading, steady, telling me without words that I didn't have to face this alone. But Clara stood tall and fearless, her heels planted firmly, her chin lifted high, her voice dripping with venom. "Everyone here knows the farm should have been mine," she continued, her words carrying across the stunned silence. "I was the eldest. I was the one who sacrificed so much. Yet she pointed at me with a dramatic sweep of her hand. She somehow ended up with everything. And I won't stand here and watch her prance around in a wedding gown while I'm left with nothing." My chest burned with humiliation. The farm wasn't just land to me. It was my father's legacy, the very heartbeat of our family. He had chosen me because I had worked beside him day after day, my hands blistered from carrying hay, my body aching from dawn till dusk. Clara had left when she was barely 19, chasing bright city lights, never looking back, never asking how Dad was doing. And now she stood there, ready to tear me apart in front of the people I loved most. The priest looked horrified, his hand hovering in the air as though he could command silence with a gesture. But his authority had evaporated. All eyes were on Clara and me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and forced my voice to steady. "This is not the time, Clara." Her laugh cut through the air, sharp and mocking. "Oh, but it is. Why not here? Why not now? Let everyone see you for who you truly are. A thief, a manipulator who hides behind a mask of innocence. Go on. Tell them I'm lying. Tell them you didn't take what was rightfully mine." Her words stabbed, but my anger began to rise like fire beneath my skin. I had tolerated her cruelty for years, swallowed my pride, avoided confrontation, all for the sake of keeping peace. But this was too far. Michael stepped forward slightly, his voice low but firm. "Enough, Clara. This is our wedding. If you have grievances, this isn't the place to air them." Clara's head snapped toward him, her lips curling into a sneer. Ah, the loyal groom, defending his precious bride. "Tell me, Michael, does she know how to work the land? Or will you be the one breaking your back while she plays the role of farmer's wife?" Gasps echoed again, and I saw my aunt clutch her pearls in shock. I felt a flush of heat crawl up my neck. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her to stop poisoning what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But my voice refused to come at first, trapped beneath years of silence. Then, slowly, something inside me cracked open. My father's voice echoed in my memory, words he had told me not long before he died. "The land belongs to the one who loves it, who nurtures it. You, my daughter, will keep it alive. Not because you are younger, but because you care." I straightened, my shoulders lifting, my breath finally steadying. I looked at Clara directly, no longer avoiding her gaze. "You left, Clara. You chose another life. Don't stand here and pretend the farm was stolen from you. You abandoned it and him. And now, you want to claim it without ever earning it." A hush fell over the room. My words cut through the whispers, ringing louder than I expected. Clara's face paled for a moment, then twisted into rage. "You ungrateful child," she spat. "I was the one who took care of this family while you were still learning to walk. I sacrificed my youth, my dreams, to pave the way for you. And this is how you repay me. You paved your own way," I snapped, my voice stronger now. "You wanted the city, the freedom, the glamorous life. You had it. It stayed. It worked. I cared for Dad until his last breath. Don't talk to me about sacrifice when you never once came back to ask how he was doing." The words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, Clara faltered. I saw the flicker of guilt cross her face, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by bitterness so deep it seemed to choke her. Michael squeezed my hand, pride shining in his eyes. "You don't have to explain yourself to her," he murmured, but I shook my head. This was no longer just about me. This was years of pain boiling to the surface, years of letting Clara dictate who I was supposed to be. Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, though her tone was sharp as ever. "You think you're so righteous, so deserving. But mark my words, little sister. Without me you're nothing. That farm will bury you, just as it buried our father." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but I refused to let her see me break. I lifted my chin, my voice clear and steady. "If the farm buries me, it will bury me with honor. Because unlike you, Clara, I know what it means to love something enough to give it everything I have. You will never understand that." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the organist sat frozen, his hands hovering above the keys. The guests looked from me to Clara wide-eyed, unsure of what to believe, but I could feel the shift in the room. For once, the weight of her dominance cracked. People had seen the truth for themselves. Clara's jaw tightened. Her hands clenched into fists at her side. Her face twisted with a fury so intense I thought she might strike me right there in the church. But instead, she turned sharply on her heel, her shoes clattering against the stone floor. Without another word, she stormed out of the church, her dress swishing behind her like a trail of venom. The heavy wooden doors slammed shut, and the sound echoed like thunder. I stood trembling, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. My body felt weak, as if all the strength I had summoned had drained out in one explosive burst. Michael caught me as my knees wavered, holding me close. "You did it," he whispered, his voice warm and steady against my ear. "You finally stood up to her." I buried my face in his chest, tears streaming silently down my cheeks. Relief and sorrow mixed inside me, tangled so tightly I couldn't tell them apart. I had defended myself, defended my father's memory, defended the life I had built, but in doing so, I felt I had lost something too. The bond of sisterhood, broken beyond repair, shattered in front of the people I cared for most. The priest cleared his throat softly, his voice trembling as he asked, "Shall we continue?" Michael looked at me, waiting for my answer. My hand still shook, but I nodded slowly. We would continue. Because Clara had taken enough from me already. She would not take this too. As the ceremony resumed, my voice wavered when I spoke my vows, but Michael's steadiness carried me through. Every word I said was a promise not just to him, but to myself, that I would not let anyone, not even my sister, tear me down again. When the priest finally declared us husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. The sound washed over me, filling the cracks Clara had left behind. I held Michael's hand tightly, lifting my head high. For the first time in years I felt free, not from my past, but from the hold Clara had always had over me. Yet as I smiled and kissed my husband, a thought lingered in the back of my mind, quiet but persistent. Clara was not done. She had left the church in anger, but her words echoed like a warning. "Mark my words, little sister. Without me, you're nothing." And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The first weeks of marriage should have been a season of bliss, and in many ways they were. Michael and I returned to the farm, our little house glowing with warmth as friends and neighbors dropped by with baskets of bread, jars of preserves, and heartfelt congratulations. Every evening, Michael and I would sit on the porch, watching the sunset bleed across the sky, dreaming aloud of what our future might hold. Children running through the fields, crops thriving, our farm expanding into something greater than either of us had dared imagine alone. Should have been perfect. And yet, beneath the laughter and the dreams, a shadow lingered. The memory of Clara storming out of the church clung to me like a dark thread woven into every thought. At first, I convinced myself it was over. She had humiliated herself in front of the entire town. Surely she would retreat, lick her wounds, and leave us in peace. But Clara had never been one to surrender quietly. Days after the wedding, whispers began to reach me. A neighbor mentioned that Clara had been seen in town, speaking heatedly to some of our relatives. Another said she was spreading stories about how I had manipulated our father into leaving me the farm. Each rumor that reached my ears was like a stone dropped into the pit of my stomach. One evening I confronted my mother, who had come by with a basket of apples. "Is it true?" I asked as we sat at the kitchen table. "Is Clara telling people I cheated her out of the farm?" My mother's eyes softened, but her lips pressed into a thin line. She avoided my gaze, fiddling with the edge of her shawl. "Your sister, she is angry, child. She feels betrayed. She says things she shouldn't, but you must not take them to heart." I slammed my hand on the table harder than I intended, startling her. "Not take them to heart. She's trying to destroy me, Mama. She embarrassed me in front of everyone at the wedding, and now she's poisoning people against me." Tears welled in my mother's eyes. "Clara is lost in her bitterness. I don't know how to bring her back." Her words broke something inside me. Clara wasn't just my sister. She was supposed to be my ally, my blood, the only other person who had shared my childhood memories, my father's love, our home. And yet, she had turned herself into my enemy. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask why, but I knew the answer. Clara could not stand that I had been chosen over her. She saw love as a competition she had lost. Michael placed a comforting hand on my shoulder later that night. "She can say what she wants," he said firmly. "People know you. They know how hard you've worked for this farm. Don't let her lies eat at you." I nodded, but his words didn't erase the ache in my chest. Because I knew Clara well enough to understand that lies were only the beginning. 2 weeks later, my fears came true. It was a warm afternoon when I went into town for supplies. As I stepped out of the general store with a sack of flour and a bundle of cloth, I felt the weight of eyes on me. Whispers rippled through the crowd, and I caught fragments. "Greedy. Stole from her sister. Unfit." My face burned as I hurried down the street, keeping my eyes fixed on the ground. Then a voice called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "How's the farm, thief? Enjoying what doesn't belong to you?" Froze. Clara stood at the corner, her arms crossed, her smile sharp and cruel. She was dressed impeccably as always, her presence commanding attention. People turned to watch, eager for the drama. My hands clenched at my sides, my heart pounding. "I didn't steal anything," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "The farm was Father's gift to me." Clara laughed, the sound echoing off the buildings. "Gift? You mean manipulation. You wrapped him around your little finger while I was out making a life of my own. You tricked him into thinking you cared more. But we all know the truth. You're nothing but a child playing farmer." The crowd whispered louder now, their eyes darting between us. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, a few almost entertained. The humiliation washed over me in waves, but I stood tall, refusing to let her see me crumble. "If you wanted the farm, Clara, you should have stayed," I said, my voice trembling but strong enough to carry. "You should have cared for him, worked beside him, loved him the way he deserved. But you didn't. You left. And you don't get to rewrite the truth now." Her smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with anger. "Mark my words, little sister. This isn't over." She turned sharply, her heels clicking as she disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a trail of murmurs and uneasy silence. That night, I broke down in Michael's arms. "She won't stop," I whispered, my voice cracking. "She'll keep coming until she takes everything from me." He held me close, his voice steady. "Then we'll fight. Together. She doesn't get to win, not this time." But Clara's battle wasn't just with words. Soon she escalated. One morning I found the barn doors flung open, the animals restless and frightened. Tools were scattered, feed spilled across the floor. Michael swore he had locked everything the night before. There were no signs of forced entry, but I didn't need proof to know who was behind it. Clara's warning echoed in my mind. This isn't over. The sabotage continued in subtle but cruel ways. Fences mysteriously broken, crops trampled, supplies stolen. Each time Michael tried to reassure me, but I saw the frustration burning in his eyes as much as I felt the fear in my heart. Clara wasn't just trying to shame me anymore. She was trying to weaken me, to prove I couldn't handle the farm, that my father had made a mistake in choosing me. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, something inside me hardened. For years, I had let Clara control me with her words, her scorn, her superiority. But now I had more to protect than just my pride. I had a husband who believed in me, a farm that carried my father's memory, a life I had worked for with every ounce of my strength. I couldn't let her destroy it. One evening, as Michael and I repaired a broken fence in the fading light, I turned to him, my hands raw and blistered, my voice steady. "She wants a war, Michael. Then she'll get one. But I'm not going to fight her with anger. I'll fight her with proof. I'll show her and everyone else that I deserve this farm, that I can make it thrive." He looked at me, pride shining in his eyes, and kissed my forehead. "That's the woman I married." From that day forward, I threw myself into the work with renewed determination. I rose before the sun, labored until my muscles ached, planned ways to expand the farm, and poured every drop of love I had into the land. Slowly, the whispers in town began to shift. People saw the effort, the sweat, the stubborn resilience. They saw me not as a girl who had inherited her father's land, but as a woman who had earned it every single day. But Clara wasn't finished. Deep down, I knew her pride would never allow her to accept defeat. She was planning something bigger, something far more dangerous than rumors or sabotage. And though I tried to prepare myself, I had no idea just how far she would go to destroy me. By the time autumn settled over the farm, I had grown used to living with a constant ache of tension, like a wound that never healed. The fields blazed with the warm hues of harvest. The air was crisp, and the days were long and full of labor. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Michael and I worked side by side, laughing when we could, leaning on each other when exhaustion threatened to drag us down. We built fences stronger than before, locked the barns with heavier chains, and kept careful watch over everything. But beneath our determination, I could feel it. Clara's presence, invisible yet suffocating, like smoke seeping through the cracks of a closed door. Her rumors hadn't stopped. If anything, they had grown sharper, more poisonous. People told me in hushed voices that Clara was visiting neighbors, spinning tales about how I was running the farm into ruin, how Michael regretted marrying me, how I was nothing without my father's guidance. Some of the townsfolk believed her. Others defended me, but the damage was done. Every sideways glance, every whisper as I passed through the market, gnawed at me. Still I pressed on, telling myself that work and truth would outshine her lies. But Clara wasn't satisfied with whispers or sabotage. She wanted to break me completely, to strip me of the very foundation I stood on. And she chose her moment with the precision of a predator. It was late one evening when Michael and I returned from the fields, our clothes dusted with soil, our muscles aching. The sky was painted in streaks of purple and gold, and the air smelled faintly of burning leaves. As we walked toward the house, I noticed something strange, a faint orange glow flickering beyond the barn. My heart clenched. At first, I thought it was the sunset catching on the wood, but then the smoke curled upward, thick and acrid. "Michael!" I screamed, dropping the basket I carried. We ran, our boots pounding against the earth. Flames licked up the side of the barn, crackling and roaring, devouring the dry wood. Inside, the terrified cries of animals pierced the air. My stomach twisted with horror. Michael didn't hesitate. He grabbed a bucket, dashed to the well, and began throwing water at the flames, but it was like trying to put out a storm with a spoon. I yanked open the barn doors, coughing as smoke poured out. The cows bellowed, the horses stamped, chickens fluttered wildly in their cages. My eyes stung, my lungs burned, but I couldn't stop. I screamed and waved, coaxing the animals out one by one, praying none of them collapsed before they reached safety. Neighbors came running, drawn by the fire, and together we fought, passing buckets, pulling animals, shouting commands through the chaos. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity, but slowly, painfully, the flames began to die. By the time the last embers smoldered, the barn was half collapsed, blackened beams jutting out like broken bones. My body shook from exhaustion, my hair reeked of smoke, my hands were blistered raw. But the animals were alive, and for that I whispered a hoarse thank you to heaven. Then I saw it. In the dirt near the well, just beyond the reach of the fire's glow, lay a familiar object. A silk handkerchief, monogrammed with the letters CM, Clara Monroe. My sister's. My breath caught in my throat, rage and disbelief surging like a tidal wave. Michael found me staring at it, his face grim, his jaw clenched. He picked it up carefully, turning it in his soot-stained hands. "She was here," he said flatly. The words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I wanted to deny it, to tell myself it could have been lost, that maybe it wasn't hers at all. But deep down I knew. Clara had set the fire. She had tried to destroy the farm, the animals, everything I had built, and she hadn't cared if I had burned with it. That night, as I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, staring at the skeletal remains of the barn, the reality sank in. This wasn't about jealousy anymore. It wasn't about inheritance or pride. It was war. Clara wanted to obliterate me, to reduce me to ashes just like she had tried to do with the barn. Michael sat beside me, his arm around my shoulders. His voice was low but fierce. "We can't let her keep doing this. She's gone too far. What do we do?" I whispered, my throat tight. "She's my sister. I can't go to the sheriff and have her arrested. I can't be the one to put her in jail." He turned to me, his eyes hard. "If you don't stop her, she'll stop you. And she won't hesitate. Tonight it was the barn. Next time." His voice trailed off, but the unspoken words hung heavy in the air. Next time it could be the house. Next time it could be us. Tears burned my eyes, but anger blazed brighter. For so long I had tried to keep the peace, to forgive her cruelty, to excuse her bitterness. But now, staring at the charred ruins, I realized peace was no longer an option. Clara would never stop. Not until she had taken everything from me. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Michael and I rebuilt as best we could, working from dawn until nightfall, our hands raw, our backs bent. Friends and neighbors came to help, some bringing wood, others bringing tools. Their kindness was a balm against the poison Clara had spread. Yet even as I accepted their aid, I saw the questions in their eyes. They had heard the rumors, they had seen Clara's fury. Some whispered that maybe she had set the fire, others weren't so sure. The doubt gnawed at me, but I held my head high, refusing to let shame claim me. But Clara wasn't finished. Weeks after the fire, a letter arrived. The handwriting was sharp, elegant, unmistakable. I unfolded it with trembling hands, and as I read, my blood ran cold. "You should have given me what was mine when I asked. Instead you chose to humiliate me. The farm is cursed in your hands. Everything you build I will tear down. Everything you love I will take. You can't win, little sister. You never could. This isn't over. Not until you are left with nothing." The letter slipped from my fingers, falling to the floor like a snake shedding its skin. My stomach churned, my heart pounding with dread. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was warning me, taunting me, promising destruction. Michael picked up the letter, his face darkening as he read. "This is proof," he said. "We could take this to the sheriff right now." I shook my head, tears spilling down my cheeks. "She's my sister, Michael. How can I send my own blood to prison?" He gripped my hands tightly, his voice urgent. "And how can you let her keep hurting us? This isn't just about you anymore. It's about me, about our future, about the family we want to build. If you don't stop her, she'll take everything. And then what will you have left?" His words cut deep because they were true. I had spent my whole life trying to protect the bond of sisterhood, trying to believe that blood was stronger than hate. But Clara's fire had burned away any illusion of love she still carried for me. She wasn't my sister anymore. Not in spirit. She was my enemy. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the letters' words etched into my mind. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind made me flinch. I imagined Clara lurking in the shadows, waiting, watching, plotting her next strike. I thought of my father, of the promise I had made to honor his legacy. And I thought of Michael, of the life we were building together. Slowly, a resolve hardened in my chest. If Clara wanted war, then war she would have. But I would not fight her with rage alone. I would fight her with courage, with truth, with everything I had left. Because this farm wasn't just land, it was my soul. And I would not let her burn it away. Winter had crept upon the farm, laying its quiet weight across the land. Frost laced the fences, the trees stood bare and brittle, and the fields slept under a thin veil of white. Life should have felt peaceful, but for me, peace had become a memory I could barely touch. Clara's letter still burned in my mind like a brand. Each morning, I awoke expecting her shadow to appear at the edge of the property, her voice whispering destruction. Each night I lay awake, listening for footsteps, for fire, for betrayal. Living under siege was no life at all, yet I carried on, clinging to the belief that somehow, someway, I would outlast her venom. Michael, ever my anchor, stayed close. He carried his strength not only in his hands but in his spirit, never letting me falter too far into despair. "She feeds on your fear," he told me one evening as we mended tools in the dim light of the kitchen. "The more you give her, the stronger she gets. You have to take that power back." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to shed the weight Clara had hung around my neck like a millstone. But before I could gather the courage, Clara struck her final, most vicious blow. It happened on a Sunday morning. Michael and I were preparing to go into town for supplies. The air was sharp, our breath rising in puffs, when the sound of carriage wheels approached. I frowned. Few visitors came unannounced, and fewer still with such speed. The carriage halted at our gate, and from it stepped Clara, draped in her finest coat, her hair gleaming, her lips painted with that cruel smile I had come to dread. Behind her, two men climbed down, strangers with hard eyes, their suits formal, their hands clutching leather satchels. "Good morning, sister," Clara called, her voice bright as if she were greeting me for tea instead of war. I thought it best to pay a visit. "You see, I've come with news." My stomach dropped. Michael stepped forward protectively, but I squared my shoulders, forcing strength into my voice. "What are you doing here, Clara? You're not welcome." She feigned a pout, her gloved hand resting delicately on her hip. "Oh, don't be so cold. I only wish to resolve what should have been mine from the beginning." She turned to the men beside her. "These are my lawyers. Filed a claim. The farm was never yours to keep, darling. Father was not of sound mind when he signed the papers. I've proof enough to contest the will." The words slammed into me like a hammer. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Contest the will. Take the farm through the law. My heart pounded in my chest, the edges of the world blurring. Michael spoke before I could. "That's a lie. Everyone knows he was clear-minded until the day he died. This farm was left to her fairly, and you can't change that with stories." Clara's eyes glittered with malice. "Oh, but stories can become truths when written on the right papers, signed by the right men. Money has a way of persuading. You should know that by now." She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You thought you won at the wedding, humiliating me before everyone. But this is my triumph. By spring you'll be gone from this land. And when you are, I'll make sure no one remembers your name." The cruelty in her tone turned my blood to fire. I had been patient, forgiving, clinging to the belief that family could be salvaged, that some shard of the sister I once loved remained buried within her. But standing there, staring into those cold eyes, I finally understood. Clara was gone. The person I grieved for had died long before, smothered by envy and hate. What stood before me was only the shell of my sister, filled with nothing but spite. I lifted my chin, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You'll never take this farm. Not through lies, not through fire, not through fear. This land is mine, and nothing you do will change that. Her smile widened, but there was a flicker of frustration beneath it, a crack in her mask. We'll see, won't we? She said, signaling to her lawyers. They handed me papers, heavy with seals and signatures. My hands shook as I took them, scanning the words, the accusations of incompetence, the claims of fraud. My father's honor, my own worth, everything I had fought to protect was smeared across the page. Michael's hand closed over mine. Don't, he whispered. Not now. We'll fight this on our terms. Clara watched us with a predator's satisfaction, then turned, her coat sweeping like a curtain as she returned to the carriage. I'll be in touch, she called. Do enjoy your winter. It may be your last here. The wheels creaked, the carriage rolled away, and silence fell heavy as a grave. I clutched the papers to my chest, my breath ragged. For a long time, neither Michael nor I spoke. The barn's skeleton loomed in the distance, the fields lay frozen, and I felt the weight of everything pressing down. But then, slowly, resolve replaced despair. Clara had chosen her battlefield, the law, the courts, the power of money. But I still had something she didn't, truth and the strength of those who believed in it. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation. Michael and I traveled to town, gathering every witness who could testify to Father's clarity of mind, every record of his estate, every note written in his hand. Neighbors who had worked beside him came forward, speaking of his wisdom, his decisions, his love for the land. Even the pastor who had prayed with him in his final days swore before God that Father had been sharp and deliberate when he left the farm to me. Piece by piece we built our defense, not with wealth or deceit, but with truth rooted deep as the soil beneath my feet. The day of the hearing arrived with bitter cold. Snowflakes drifted like ashes as Michael and I entered the courthouse, my heart hammering in my chest. Clara was already there, resplendent in jewels and velvet, her lawyers flanking her like guards. She smirked as I walked past, her eyes gleaming with confidence. But I did not flinch. Hours stretched into eternity as arguments were made, evidence presented, testimonies heard. Clara's lawyers painted me as a manipulator, a desperate woman clinging to land that was never hers. But when our witnesses spoke, when Father's own words were read aloud, the tide began to shift. I saw it in the judge's eyes, in the murmurs of the crowd. Truth carried a weight no bribe could match. At last, the judge's gavel struck. His voice rang clear. The will stands. The farm remains in the rightful possession of the daughter to whom it was bequeathed. The words crashed over me like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Relief, sharp and overwhelming, stole my breath. Michael squeezed my hand, his face breaking into a rare, unguarded smile. Around us, neighbors nodded, some even cheering quietly. But Clara sat frozen, her face pale, her lips trembling with fury. For the first time she looked small, powerless, undone. She rose abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her eyes locked onto mine, blazing with hate. This isn't the end, she hissed. It will never be the end. Then she swept from the room, her footsteps echoing like thunder. But in my heart I knew it was over. She could rage, she could threaten, but her power was broken. She had played her last card and lost. That night, back at the farm, I stood on the porch, the cold air biting my cheeks, the stars burning bright above. The land stretched before me, quiet and eternal, and for the first time in months I felt safe. Clara might still lurk in the shadows of her own bitterness, but she no longer held me in her grasp. I was free. Michael came out, wrapping his arms around me. It's ours, he said softly, his breath warm against my ear. It always was. And now it always will be. Tears filled my eyes, not of sorrow but of release, of triumph. I thought of Father, of the promise I had made to honor his legacy, and I whispered into the night. I kept it, Papa. I kept it safe. The farm would stand. The love Michael and I shared would endure. Clara's shadow might linger, but it no longer dimmed my light. I had fought, I had endured, and in the end I had won. Not just the farm but my freedom, my future, my peace. And as the wind whispered through the bare branches, I knew this was the true inheritance. Not the land alone, but the strength to protect it, the courage to fight for it, and the faith that no fire, no lie, no sister spite could ever take it from me again. Sparkles, if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Sparkles, subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more powerful and emotional tales every week.